roughed up for speaking out.
Or I got sucker punched back in the head.
About Southerners taking Nunavut jobs.
I will continue to push hard to make sure that we have a representative workforce.
People want to see their governments represented by the people that, live in our community.
So why not hire all Inuit?
Hello, I'm Todd Lamoran. Tonight on APTN Investigates, Nunavut, Canada's youngest and biggest territory, roughly the size of Western Europe, but populated by only 35,000 people. Inuit are the majority at 85%. To keep it that way, they depend on something called Article 23, part of the Nunavut Constitution that says the government workforce must reflect the population. It also sets an example for private employers to follow. But this man says Inuit are being passed over for those jobs, making him a lone voice that is threatening the status quo. As Kathleen Martens explains, you'll see that he risks some serious backlash.
This is how some Canadians picture a day of work in Nunavut. In fact, it used to be out on the land, hunting animals for food or clothing.
It's good for the mind, the spirit. Everybody needs to get away from public once in a while and learn what our ancestors, how they survived for thousands of years.
It was the old way before Inuit were colonized, forced into communities and a 9-to-5 day. Pressure to punch a clock ramped up when Nunavut was formed 17 years ago. Yet this petition claims Inuit can't get hired in their own territory.
You want to sign this petition? It's for Article 23, Article 24, and Article 35. Our government is supposed to have 85% of Inuit working for the government and trained Inuits. Right now it's less than 40%.
Inuktitut's petition calls for employment protection enshrined in the Nunavut Constitution to be honored. Back when the territory was formed in 1999, articles were included to ensure Indigenous people, the Inuit, would always have a home and a majority stake in the future of Nunavut, which means our land in their language of Inuktitut.
All right then.
Thank you.
No problem. See you later.
Inuktitut says the government and other employers are ignoring the rules. That's why his petition has riled people up.
I think the results are pretty good. It shows that we do need a lot of support from our government up here. It's time to help out the Inuit people, because over the years that we saw all these companies go 100% non-Inuits, subsidized staff housing was never going to us. Even though a lot of jobs that doesn't require education, like cab drivers, bar staff workers, construction.
Are filled by non-Inuit workers recruited from southern Canada. Something APTN Investigates confirmed at several workplaces in Iqaluit. Learning these employees receive a northern living allowance from the federal government and private food and housing subsidies.
You home?
While some locals live in plywood shacks like this one.
He works too. You can see a big belt right here, workers belt. Most of these Inuits who live in these shacks have full-time jobs, but they can't get subsidized staff housing.
We didn't meet this man, but Inuktitut let us into his shack.
It's been a very big common problem up here, even with the companies. I heard of several construction companies where they buy their friends plane tickets all the time to go on vacations, but Inuits get nothing.
Inuktitut says not every Inuk can afford to pay rent and buy groceries in the same month, because the prices are just too high.
That's why we live in shacks, and only non-Inuits have been purchasing homes.
Nicer sheds than these are used to store lawnmowers down south.
Sometimes their Coleman stoves could malfunction, or they were using wood stoves before, but the wood stoves were catching more on fire. This is APTN.
But on the shore of Frobisher Bay in the middle of an Arctic winter, they can mean the difference between life and death. Jomi Nalinik has been living here for 5 years. He has no electricity or running water, depending on this camping stove for cooking and heating, even though it fills the place with the smell of kerosene.
Do you work?
No, I'm unemployed right now.
Like, would you want to work? Like, if the opportunity was there for you?
Yes, I would like to work, but I kept getting injured in construction work sites. I even had a knee surgery. We had to carry dishwashers up to the 4th floor.
So you were working on apartments, but you can't live in an apartment?
Yes, they're quite expensive. I think they charge about $3,000 a month.
Are you from Iqaluit?
Yes, I was born here.
So how do you feel as an Inuit in your own homeland? How do you feel you're treated when it comes to jobs?
Do you feel really frustrated? Only non-Inuits have been getting only staff housing for so many years?
Yes, I've been seeing that a lot. They've been...
companies going 100% non-Inuits and they get subsidized housing.
Yes,
and meanwhile, you're living here?
Yes, they do that, yes.
Inuktitut thinks it's wrong to bring in workers from outside Nunavut when so many Inuit are homeless and unemployed like Nalilik. Statistics Canada reports the territory has the highest unemployment rate in the nation. Are you sure it's because you're Inuit? Do you think it's because people aren't qualified?
That's why, yeah. Most of the jobs that even doesn't require education, we still can't get jobs. And they just keep calling up Southerners, Southerners, Southerner.
Inuktitut says it's racial discrimination that keeps Inuit from applying for all kinds of positions, like with the RCMP and its good wages, housing and travel benefits.
Nobody wants to work there because we don't get same equal rights. It's a very big factor up here.
Politicians here know Nunavut has created a massive bureaucracy. It's sometimes known as Little Ottawa. People work for the government of Nunavut, the government of Canada, and NTI. So with all of those jobs, why is Inuit employment at 50% or less? When Nunavut was formed, the 85% Inuit population was a solid foundation for Indigenous self-rule. But if its own leaders don't follow the hiring rules, why should private employers?
Inuits' rights, jobs, housing, training. And that's what our government promised us 17 years ago.
I'm overwhelmed with pride.
It was an emotional day for the first premier when Nunavut became a reality in 1999, carved off from Northwest Territories to preserve Inuit language and culture. Prime Minister Jean Chrétien was there to celebrate in person.
I have watched with great admiration and respect as the people of Nunavut have assumed more and more authority, demonstrating their determination to build a vibrant new territory.
This was achieved through peaceful negotiations, without civil disobedience, without litigation. We have established a public government that will represent all the people of Nunavut equally and democratically.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think when you see that?
Well, my drive is still there, and my willingness to serve is still there, because our dream should never die.
Iqaluit is no longer the premier, but he's still a politician and a vocal critic of the lack of a representative workforce in the government of Nunavut. That's why he says he signed Inuktitut's petition.
We have a duty to do our part in implementing Article 23 and training and employing as many Inuit as we can.
Nunavut has two major employers, the Government of Nunavut with 4,000 positions and the Government of Canada with 400. Both provide training for Inuit to land jobs in the public and private sectors.
Is there Inuk deputy minister managing the HR.
Iqaluit says the number of Inuit working in the Nunavut government reached 51% when he left the Premier's office in 2008. But he says it has since slipped back to 50%. What really bothers him is that hiring and firing decisions are made by non-Inuit managers, because only 21% of senior government positions are held by Inuit.
So that's how sad we are today. We won't get to 85% at this rate when we deny opportunities for our own citizens in our territory to take on the leadership role in our government. We have to show that we're committed to doing that and lead by example. It's one area where we can show the territory that, look, when you hire Inuit, there's benefits to that. Local knowledge, local expertise, it pays off for everyone.
We requested an interview with Nunavut Premier Peter Taptuna for this story. But we were told he was traveling and not able to meet with APTN Investigates when we were in the community. This didn't surprise Inuktitut. He says neither Nunavut's top politician nor people on the street want to speak publicly about this issue.
Nobody else wants to take over the petition because they're scared of the government or being scared of being assaulted by non-Inuits and stuff.
Coming up, Article 23 sounded like a good idea at the time, but it lacks teeth. As we'll show you, no one is enforcing it. We'll have more in a moment. Why aren't employers penalized when they don't hire Inuit? Article 23 calls for at least 85% Inuit employment. One man says this hands-off approach is doing a lot of damage. And Kwamar Iqaluit sees meaningful work as a big part of the solution. Here's Act 2 of Article 23.
When I was walking, I heard somebody run up right at the last second. Then I don't know, I got sucker punched back of the head.
Iqaluit knew people would be upset.
When I was at home, somebody was kicking out my door. And next thing you know, I went to go check it out. He was really drunk. But I don't know, he was saying that you're trying to f with us. I'm like, okay, what's going on here?
But he didn't think they'd resort to violence. This is how most people react.
It's a petition. It's for Article 23, Article 24, and Article 35 land claim agreements.
I went pretty much door to door in each house in Iqaluit and gathered a lot of signatures. I think close to 1,200 now on paper, close to 500 online now.
Nunavut is a tough place to live and govern. It's the size of Western Europe, with just over 30,000 people living in 25 isolated communities. There are no roads to connect them, and airfare is outrageously expensive. In hotels, restaurants, coffee shops, stores, I am being waited on by non-Inuit personnel. Do you notice that?
Sadly at times, but in a lot of other places, when I see in the smaller communities, you'll see Inuit working at those positions. So it's an unfortunate situation here in our own capital where we need to show that we are committed to Inuit employment.
Many Inuit make the difficult but necessary decision to leave their smaller communities for jobs or school in the capital city. Paul Iqaluit was one of them.
When I left in 2011, even though I had more than one university degree, I couldn't get work.
He says he understands how some Inuit end up living in these unheated wooden shacks and shipping containers.
It's very hard to be trying to survive in our own territory without employment and opportunities. So it gets very frustrating and demoralizing.
They come to go look for jobs that they got nowhere to stay. So yeah, and a lot of elders prefer to sleep in shacks because it gives them privacy. When there was a shack fire right here a few months ago.
Inuktitut says the small homeless shelter is always full, and there isn't the choice of apartments to rent like down south. This person sleeps in a tent inside their shack.
You in here? See, like he has this place organized and neat. Like a small little single mattress. And like a big gap where there's always air coming in. There's a lot of shack like these all around the beach.
Inuktitut says it's embarrassing to see how some Inuit are living in what's supposed to be their homeland. Who are you blaming for the situation?
Government of Canada and Government of Nunavut, because Government of Canada's giving all these fundings to Government of Nunavut. Government of Canada should pay closer attention where the money's going. Is the money being used successfully for the Inuit people?
The Inuit are the only Indigenous group in Canada to have their own territory and $1 billion in trust. They would control their own destiny when they split from the Northwest Territories to preserve their language and their culture. But people like Inuktitut are worried that that dream is crumbling. In summer, these shacks are an eyesore in front of picturesque Frobisher Bay.
Social housing falls under the territorial responsibility.
Mayor Madeleine Redfern lives on the same street.
Some people have been denied housing because the mindset has been that, well, if you live in this community, you don't need housing. And that housing, therefore, is for people who are moving in from another community or from the south.
Redfern is referring to social housing like that green building on the left. It's something the government of Nunavut is responsible for. We were told the units are always full and have a long list of people waiting to get in. The government also supplies housing for its employees to rent at a discount.
In many communities, a lot of those units sit empty because they are targeted to a particular staff position. And it might take, 2 years or more to fill that position, and yet people are, living in the communities without adequate housing.
Redfern says Article 23 applies to all levels of government in Nunavut. She admits the city has a ways to go to reach that magic number of 85%.
About 90% Inuit in our public works, which represents about a third of our city employees. We do have less Inuit in many of the other departments.
So have Inuit applied then and been passed over?
That happens probably everywhere. Article 23 does have a provision that is supposed to look at equivalencies. But when you have positions where certification is required, you have no choice but to hire someone who is certified.
Inuktitut calls BS here. He says the city should be training Inuit to obtain the certification before hiring non-Inuit. Inuktitut says there's more of the same in these want ads. Even though Inuktitut is the dominant language, these employers don't ask for it, demanding French and English instead. He says Inuit experience is not valued the same as a Southern education, effectively keeping Inuit out of the workforce. Seeking star power to help with his battle, Inuktitut wrote to activist David Suzuki. We Inuit want to work and feed our families just like anyone else, but I believe systemic racism and mismanagement are holding us back. Jobs aren't often made available to beneficiaries, and this trend is getting worse, not better. This has resulted in so much homelessness, hopelessness, and poverty for my people. Many intentionally commit small crimes to land in jail, where they can at least be sure of shelter and food. But this results in a criminal record, another barrier to employment. So, many of us are forced to scatter to the south because we can no longer afford to live in our own homeland. Suzuki responded right away. I agree with your analysis that government continues its path of cultural genocide. I am amazed that with the history of terrible disease episodes and the residential school program to wipe out the culture, that Indigenous people still exist, albeit most under terrible conditions. I have to believe that the drive for a better life lies in the demand for government to uphold promises made through treaties and other formal arrangements. Article 23 is one of those arrangements. That's why Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated, or NTI, sued the federal government in 2006 for $1 billion, alleging the federal government failed to implement Article 23 and increase Inuit employment. That lawsuit was settled in 2015 for $255.5 million, with the money earmarked for Inuit training programs. NTI plans to spend $175 million building an Inuit training center, even though training is not part of its mandate, and it doesn't have the power to enforce Article 23. Aluki Kotirik is the new president of NTI.
For me, Inuit empowerment is having the opportunity for Inuit to know that they can dream and be whatever they want to be. I would say makimautiksak is the ability to stand up tall kind of in our own homeland.
We'll make ourselves accountable, all of us accountable.
NTI's training will be in addition to what the Nunavut and federal governments already offer. Redfern says this training push should help loosen the colonial grip on Nunavut's bureaucracy, where most of the decisions are made by non-Inuit senior civil servants, a situation she says stokes resentment.
What Inuit didn't feel before the land claim agreement was that this territory was not run by us. It was very much dominated by non-Inuit, so Ottawa had tremendous influence, or Yellowknife.
So a Nunavut by Inuit, for Inuit.
That's what the land claim was all about.
So, while elected officials do what they do, Inuktitut makes sure people who live in the shacks don't get too cold or hungry.
Got some donations.
By handing out these donations, concerned Canadians have shipped up north.
I'll just wake you up. Sorry about that.
Will the Article 23 petition spark a fire under Inuit leaders, or will it be business as usual? NTI has a new president with new promises. She's in charge of the money and trust. Will she use it to support a successful generation off the land, or signal Nunavut jobs are free for the taking? Next week, Rob Smith has ripped off. First Nations claim Canada owes them millions of dollars for taking their land. The previous government set up a process to deal with them, but critics say it's failing. Tune in next week. I'm Todd Lamarand. Have a great evening.